absolutely breathless after this. The sheer strategic brilliance of the winter campaign, landing secretly ahead of schedule, Yu Fu's masterful feint on the river, is just phenomenal. Watching the disciplined march, the feint playing out perfectly, and then that fascinating side plot where capturing foragers turns into a mass recruitment drive under fake blind man. Pure narrative gold. What truly resonated was the jarring contrast, the cold, calculated efficiency of the military maneuver against the incredibly raw, intimate, and life-or-death intensity of Xiao Die and Zhan Ying's childbirth scenes. Seeing the chief navigate both leadership and impending fatherhood added such depth. Now, with the land and sea forces converging, the meticulously planned encirclement feels terrifyingly real. The final hammer blow is about to fall. Can this intricate plan truly account for everything when facing a cornered tribe? The end of winter was near, marking the last miserable month. The Qianniu Guard and Huben Guard had lain hidden in the darkness for 2 days, like two great cats poised to pounce, stealthily squatting on the outskirts of the target barbarian tribe's camp, waiting only for the signal from the fleet. And what of our target? Misery, spelled in capital letters, harassed by Yu Fu and his men for 2 days and nights straight. They were already a spent force, visibly on the verge of running out of food. They had already been tightening their belts, hoping to last until spring. But then Yu Fu and his band of good neighbors arrived, and well, forget conserving. They had to eat for dear life. Otherwise, if a real fight broke out, wouldn't facing it on an empty stomach be suicide? Consequently, the barbarian tribe had been on edge constantly these past 2 days. By day, they desperately worked to break up the ice along the riverbank, creating iceberg obstacles, while also diverting manpower to painstakingly haul stones, preparing to hurl them at crucial moments. Sleep offered no respite at night. Yu Fu, leveraging his superior numbers and ships, launched relentless rotating night raids. And wouldn't you know it, catching the barbarians nodding off, they actually managed to slip ashore and grab a few unlucky souls, snatching them up and immediately retreating. The epitome of hit-and-run tactics. The barbarians, pushed to their limit, had no choice but to light a line of bonfires along the riverbank and endure long, sleepless nights, burning through precious firewood at an alarming rate. They lacked the substantial resources of the Han tribe, short on clothing and food. With their dwellings far off, they could only stand exposed to the biting wind, freezing like popsicles, while straining their eyes to watch for attackers. The next day, Yu Fu's actions were designed to kill the spirit as much as the body. 3 sailboats pulled up near the shore, the captives seized the day before tied to the masts for a live broadcast of tough love. Whips cracked, piercing screams tore through the air, causing the barbarians on shore to stare with eyes wide with fury, their anger boiling over. Even more ruthlessly, once the beating was nearly done, right before everyone's eyes snap, the captives' big toes were cut off. Then, with a searing hiss, red-hot irons branded slave marks onto their bodies. The entire process burned the word slave not just into their flesh, but also into the hearts of the barbarians watching from the shore. The Han sailors, however, felt deeply satisfied. Months ago, their brothers had been slaughtered right here. Today, they finally had their revenge. This move by Yu Fu stirred up even more hatred than the night raids. The barbarian warriors on shore completely lost it, howling and surging forward, wanting to rescue their kinsmen. Even their leader, Zhu, could barely keep control. But just as the barbarians were about to explode, Yu Fu's 3 ships slowly meandered back to the middle of the river, leaving the crowd on the bank stamping their feet in rage, throwing stones that splashed harmlessly in the water, unable to reach their tormentors. Frustration, fury, helplessness, watching their own people captured and brutalized while they could only stare impotently, filled the entire barbarian camp with a crushing sense of impending doom. Yet this changed nothing. Yu Fu's harassment continued. Whenever an opportunity arose, he seized people, dragged them onto the ships, and beat them. After 2 days of this physical and mental torment, by the morning of the 3rd day, every barbarian warrior sported bloodshot, panda-like eyes, their spirits as wilted as frost-bitten eggplants. Just when they expected Yu Fu to start his usual routine, the three ships in the middle of the river remained unnaturally quiet. This baffled even Ju. What were these guys up to? Could they also be exhausted and preparing to withdraw? As the barbarians collectively scratched their heads, thinking their ordeal might be over, events instantly shattered their hopes. A two-masted sailboat, the same size as those in Yu Fu's fleet, sails fully unfurled, was rapidly charging towards them. The barbarians were stunned. Holy crap, they weren't retreating, they were being reinforced. Seeing the new ship, the faces of the barbarian warriors instantly turned as black as the bottom of a pot. 3 ships were bad enough. Now another one. How could they possibly defend against this? However, this was merely the beginning. Just as the first reinforcement ship arrived, several more identical sailboats appeared behind it, one after another. In the blink of an eye, the fleet had expanded to 10 ships. The sheer number was terrifying. Quite a few barbarian warriors were already thinking of retreat, but the Han tribe clearly had no intention of giving them breathing room. More and more ships appeared in the middle of the river. 10 became 20, and finally, a full 28 sailboats nearly covered the river's surface. Only then did the main event of this operation slowly make its entrance. 3 behemoths, 3-masted tower ships, accompanied by several large transport vessels, sailed slowly into view. Their presence was like that of moving hills. This spectacle became the final straw that broke the barbarians' nerve. Run! Run! The barbarians completely broke down, utterly terrified, screaming and shouting as they dragged their families, trying to flee into the forest behind the settlement, hoping to wait until these bringers of plague had left. Their hopes were high, but reality was harsh. Just as some had gathered their meager belongings and grabbed their wives and children, ready to bolt, a deafening roar suddenly erupted from the river behind them. Dong! It was the sound of hundreds of large drums beating simultaneously on over 30 ships. Dong, 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 dong. The drumming grew denser, faster, vibrating the very air, feeling as if it could tear eardrums. The immense wave of sound instantly traveled for miles, reaching the distant forest precisely. The signal for the ambushing troops. In the forest, Shuitu and Chaiduoduo, who had been waiting so long they felt like flowers about to wilt, leaped up the moment they heard the drums. With an excited wave of his hand, Shuitu roared at the messenger. "Entire army, assemble, form. Align, surround them for me!" Clang, the uniform sound of scraping iron armor suddenly rose. Thousands of brightly armored soldiers seemed to spring from the earth, erupting from the woods. Following their officers' commands, they rapidly shifted formation, deploying into a seemingly endless steel line. Marching to the accelerating drumbeat, they advanced steadily like an unstoppable flood. The barbarian settlement was already in utter chaos. Everyone knew the Han tribe was about to launch a major landing and desperately tried to escape into the forest. But they never imagined that another army flying banners with the character Han would emerge from the forest itself. Those barbarians who had just intended to dive into the woods for safety slammed headfirst into this slowly advancing iron wall and were instantly stunned. Looking closely, yes, they were Han tribesmen, but their equipment, mother of. Both weapons and armor were 100 times more lavish than those of the sailors on the ships. It was over. This time, they had truly run headfirst into a brick wall. Military merit ranks. Those were the hard currency for promotion and wealth. Who wouldn't covet them? Seeing that the signal for the general assault had sounded and the enemy numbered so few, only a fool would stand around waiting for fortune to fall from the sky. The order given. The 4,000-plus hot-blooded youths of the Qianniu and Huben Guards let out fierce roars and charged like tigers descending a mountain, instantly surging forward, afraid that if they were a step too late, all the glory would be snatched by others. The shield-bearers in the first wave were especially ferocious in their charge. Among them, a banner captain named Sturdy Shield transformed into a veritable mad bull. Hoisting a large, solid wood shield painted with a bull emblem, he charged recklessly into the enemy throng. His heavy armor combined with his suicidal charge generated incredible momentum. Sturdy shield was practically a human tank. The wooden club in his hand was mere decoration. Whoever he hit went flying. He single-handedly plowed a bloody path through the enemy formation. Seeing their banner captain's ferocity, the soldiers under him were instantly fired up. More than 50 robust young men fully embraced the Qianniu Guards' mad bull spirit, charging headlong with their shields, crashing into enemy after enemy, sending them tumbling and filling the air with cries of agony. The barbarian leader, Ju, was completely dumbfounded. He had planned to concentrate his forces to break through at one point, but he never expected these Han bastards to abandon encirclement and launch a countercharge against him. They had shattered his vanguard in the first clash. He failed to consider that his own warriors had already endured 2 days and nights without adequate food, warmth, or rest. How could they possibly match elite troops clad in heavy armor and wielding large shields? In a head-on collision, wasn't that just asking for death? Before Ju could make further arrangements, the Han tribe's signal for the general assault rang out. Large numbers of enemies poured into his ranks like a tide. He could no longer worry about others. His only thought was to cut a path out and escape with his life. He wielded the 2 gooseneck steel sabers he had captured previously, swinging them with whirlwind speed, creating an impenetrable defense. Because the Han soldiers wanted to capture him alive, for a moment they hesitated to get too close, and several were wounded by his blades. But just then, a squad ensign leading spearmen let out a strange cry and charged from Ju's side rear with a 4-meter-long great halberd. The iron halberd struck like a viper's tongue, squish piercing straight through Ju's lower back. The blood-red spearhead emerged from Ju's abdomen. He froze as if struck by lightning, his spirit instantly draining away. He swayed unsteadily, finally managing to prop himself up only by planting his 2 sabers into the ground. Immediately after, the squad ensign yelled at the top of his lungs, "This man is the enemy leader! Take no prisoners! Spear him to death!" Hearing this, the surrounding Han soldiers became instantly energized, thrusting their long spears and iron halberds, roaring as they converged on Juju, who moments before had been wielding his sabers with impunity, was instantly turned into a bloody pincushion by dozens of spears and halberds. Hoisted into the air by a circle of spearmen, he stared blankly and fearfully at the sky, his eyes gradually dimming until they finally lost their light. With the death of the barbarian leader, the remaining young barbarian men still resisting, completely collapsed under the absolute superiority and frenzied attack of the Han army. They quickly chose to surrender, flee, or were cut down where they stood. Of the more than 700 young men, aside from a few killed outright, most were captured. Only 1,000 or so elderly, women, and children were left, retreating to the riverbank trembling. While the battle raged ashore, the fleet's 100 landing craft successfully stormed the beach. Hundreds of sailors armed with simple long spears, short axes or rattan shields, and conical hats blocked the final retreat route for these non-combatants and children. As the main fighting subsided, apart from some soldiers assigned to guard the prisoners behind the lines, the remaining warriors continued to advance. Eventually, the 2 Han forces met, completely encircling the nearly 2,000 barbarian elderly, women, children, and defeated stragglers on the riverbank shoals. "Surrender, and you will not be killed," shouted several officers at the forefront, simultaneously towards those inside the encirclement. "Surrender, and you will not be killed," echoed the other soldiers, although they were privately wondering, did these old folks, women, and children even count towards military merit? If forcing their surrender was this easy, wasn't it a bit too simple? Meanwhile, the women, children, and defeated stragglers trapped in the center of the encirclement saw they were completely surrounded with no hope of escape. Some had considered fighting to the last, a final act of defiance before death. However, to their utter surprise, these enemies who had come from afar did not immediately kill them, but instead forced them to lay down their arms and surrender. At first, no one had paid much attention, but now that the fighting was over, they realized that very few of their tribe's men had actually been killed. Most had been tied up. The only ones dead were the leader and a few of his die-hard followers. Thinking this through, some instantly abandoned thoughts of desperate resistance and began considering surrender. This was especially true for the defeated stragglers hiding amongst the women and children. They were cowards to begin with. Otherwise, they wouldn't have snuck to the rear during the main battle. Hearing now that surrender meant survival, they immediately dropped their weapons, pushed their way out of the crowd, and prostrated themselves on the ground in surrender. Seeing this, the Han side quickly sent men forward to bind these individuals and escort them to the rear. The women still watching saw that even the last few men had surrendered, leaving them little choice but to follow suit. In primitive societies, when tribes conquered one another, the women of the defeated side were generally not killed, but taken home as spoils of war. These women understood this well. Even if they surrendered, they wouldn't be killed, just moved to a different home with unfamiliar men. Besides, their own men had been captured, their fates unknown. But without men, their tribe certainly couldn't survive. The choices before them were few: die with the tribe through suicide, or find new men and start a new life. That was all. Their only worry was how these victors would treat their children. Would they kill them outright or take them back and raise them? After all, children who hadn't grown up couldn't do heavy labor, but still required large amounts of food, a huge burden for any tribe. If the enemy intended to kill their children, what could they do? Fortunately, the Han tribe did not do that. Instead, they categorized the captives by age and gender. All girls were imprisoned with the women. Boys under 8 years old could stay with their mothers. Underage boys between 8 and 12 would be sent to various parts of the Han territory to perform agricultural labor on government official lands for 3 years. Those who performed well after 3 years would be granted Han citizenship status. As for males 13 years or older, their fate was less fortunate. They would all have their big toes cut off, their heads shaved, and characters tattooed onto their foreheads, becoming lifelong slaves of the Han tribe, destined to spend the rest of their lives on various large construction sites or in mines. Victory report quickly reached your hands. The Qianniu Guard, Huben Guard, plus the fleet leader Yu Fu. The 3 big shots put their heads together, tallied things up, and first sent you a boss. "We won" battle report, while also requesting instructions for the next steps and how to handle the pile of captives. And you, at this very moment, were busy changing diapers for 2 babies. The joy of new fatherhood made you wish you could move your desk right next to the cribs, needing to go over and take a peek every so often. Even though those 2 little masters did nothing but sleep all day long, giving their own father absolutely no recognition. You unfolded the letter, read the description of the battle scene depicted within, nodded in satisfaction, and began to rapidly scribble a reply. The reply contained quite a bit. First, a round of hearty praise, commending everyone for their valiant fighting and for living up to expectations. Then came the orders. The Huben Guard was to make camp on the spot, converting the Barbarians' camp into a temporary base. Treat the wounded properly. If anyone suffered permanent disability, they were to be sent home by ship to retire once healed. Also, the method used by the logistics lads, using grain to entice neighboring tribes, was excellent and deserved public commendation. While stationed there, the Huben Guard should make rounds frequently, build good relations with nearby tribes, and win over any who could be won over. If necessary, they were permitted to use force to reason with them. Next concerned the tallying of military merits. Orders were given for the Sima, military officials, adjutants at all levels to promptly submit the lists of personnel who had performed meritorious service, guaranteeing immediate approval with absolutely no delay. Finally, personnel movements. The fleet was to detach all 3-masted tower ships to transport the captives to the Xin Gang Commandery docks. Women and children were to remain for later assignment. Male slaves were first to be processed a bit in Xin Gang Commandery, toes cut off, heads shaved, faces tattooed, allowed to heal, and then transported to various construction sites and mines across the territory to contribute their remaining usefulness. All remaining 2-masted sailboats and 3-masted transport ships were tasked with transporting the entire Qianniu Guard, men, horses, and baggage, to the western shore of the Great Lake of the Grasslands. Yufu would lead the convoy and also contact Jinwu Guard Commander Yuchi to finalize the location for the new city. Upon arrival, the Qianniu Guard was to immediately disembark, make camp, drill when not otherwise occupied, await further supplies, and take charge of constructing and defending the new city. The reply was delivered swiftly. The commanders of the 2 guards began to act according to the orders, but these commands brought mixed reactions. Joy for some, dismay for others. The Huben Guard were overjoyed. Rest in place, get to go out visiting to recruit people, and even use force. What did this mean? It meant more fighting was possible. And fighting meant opportunities to earn merit and gain rank. Who wouldn't like that? But the 2,000+ men of the Qianniu Guard looked utterly dismayed. A single order, and they were effectively exiled to the grasslands. They heard it was a barren place where birds wouldn't even crap with few enemies, and the main task was manual labor building a city. Hardship wasn't the fear. What soldier hadn't endured hardship? But hardship without glory? That felt like a raw deal. Consequently, the officers and men of the Qianniu Guard harbored some resentment and became quite dejected. But the boss had spoken. Who dared disobey? Very unwillingly, they boarded the fleet heading south to the grasslands. A few days later, you received news of this and were so furious you nearly flipped your desk. You immediately sent a swift message, chewing out the Qianniu Guard's Sima Yingrui by name. You bastard, you're in charge of intelligence, logistics, and morale. How could you let the soldiers set out in such spirits? Did I send you to the grasslands for a vacation? You're going there to fight nomadic tribes. You haven't even arrived, and morale has already collapsed by half. If enemy cavalry charges you during landing, can I still count on you to win? Can I count on you to bring those 2,000+ elites back alive? How can you face the parents, wives, and children waiting at home? Receiving the letter, Yingrui broke out in a cold sweat. He actually knew the troops were disgruntled, but hadn't realized the consequences would be so severe. He quickly convened a meeting with his subordinate, Zumi, emphasizing the boss's instructions. The Qianniu Guard's mission to the grasslands is arduous. The grasslands are currently a complete mess, and fighting could break out at any moment. Everyone better pull themselves together and stop being so dejected. Hearing this, the soldiers suddenly understood. Oh, so we're not going just to move. Bricks, there are hard battles to be fought. The boss sent us because we can fight. Those factions on the grasslands are currently at each other's throats, and we're building a city on their turf. Doesn't that mean we need to be ready to fight at any time? Once the news spread, the soldiers' morale instantly soared. The previous attitude of just going through the motions vanished in an instant, replaced by the bearing of an elite force. Watching this transformation, Yingrui breathed a long sigh of relief. He had finally restored morale. But he also wondered privately, how did the boss find out about this? Who snitched? After a little thought, his suspicion fell upon the fleet's Yufu. The entire Qianniu Guard was currently on the ships. Only the Dia sailors on board would know what was said and done. Who else could it be? And wasn't Yufu the boss of these sailors? However, Yingrui wasn't stupid enough to confront Yufu directly. This time he truly hadn't done his job properly and was in the wrong. But if it happened again, he would definitely have to ask Yufu what exactly his intentions were. However, Yingrui had truly wronged Yufu in this matter. Yufu was a case of sitting on the ship while the blame falls from the sky, and he was taking the fall for his own nephew, Yuji. Yuji's promotion to Jinwu Guard Commander wasn't a secret, but the fact that he was the intelligence chief was known by very few. For work convenience, Yuji hadn't hesitated to plant a few trusted aides, members of his own clan, around his uncle. Their task was simple: keep an eye on the fleet day to day. After all, such a large fleet was a precious asset to the Han tribe. The cost of building and maintaining the ships alone could support an entire commandery. Neither Yuji nor Yu had expected that the first significant piece of intelligence reported by the Jinwu Guard wouldn't be about the sailors, but about the passengers, the Qianniu Guard. But regardless, since the problem had occurred, it couldn't be ignored. Hence, the subsequent events. Poor Yu Fu, completely unaware, ended up taking the major blame for his nephew, unable to shake it off even if he tried. Large ships and small went their separate ways. Only the Huben Guard remained in place. They first spent 2 days cleaning up the camp, then brought out their own grain and began searching the surroundings for tribes on the brink of starvation, initiating a program of targeted aid. The condition was the same old one. Those willing to submit would be guaranteed full bellies. This move proved outstandingly effective, immediately attracting many small tribes who eagerly came to join them. These small tribes showed little resistance. Millennia of experience had taught them natural selection, survival of the fittest. For small tribes to survive, they either had to become strong themselves or latch onto a powerful protector. Relying on the strong was no loss of face. Therefore, joining the Han tribe was a good thing for them. For the Han tribe, naturally, the more the better. Absorbing these natives not only increased the population but also provided rapid understanding of local products, resources, climate conditions, and other key information, laying a good foundation for future development. For instance, this time the Huben Guard obtained something valuable from a tribe called Papa. This thing wasn't any kind of ore, but for the Han tribe currently, it was more important than a gold mine. It was a fruit the locals called Papa. It looked a bit like a loofah, grew on a climbing vine, and produced fruit about the size of a soda can, oval-shaped, somewhat resembling a mango, but with a hard, thick skin. When ripe, it turned purple and had 4 distinct ridges. Once fully ripe, the fruit would burst open along these 4 ridges with a pop sound, transforming into something resembling a 4-petaled flower opening downwards. From the center of the petals, 5 or 6 white cherry-sized seeds would hang down. After the flower had been open for a few days, these seeds would turn from white to yellow and then drop off on their own. These seeds were similar to nuts, could be stored for a long time, and were a favorite food of the local natives. However, what made the Huben Guard Sima, Shui Dongliang, eyes light up was not the seeds of this papa fruit but the bursting husk itself. Why was it compared to a loofah? Because when a loofah ages, its inner pulp becomes a sponge-like substance used for scrubbing pots or bathing. This papa fruit had a similar property. When its flesh fully ripened, it turned into a white, fluffy substance filled with air. When heated by the sun, the trapped air expanded, bursting the husk. This fluffy material then clung to the inside of the opened rind like silk floss in a cocoon, exposing the seeds. Was Shui Dongliang interested in the seeds? No. He was interested in that fluffy white substance. This stuff looked like wool, yet also like silk floss. The fibers were fine and long, pure white and soft. Most importantly, unlike willow catkins that tear easily, it had superb toughness and exceptional tensile strength. Wasn't this precisely the plant-based wool substitute the boss was always talking about finding? And that purple rind? It was a rare natural purple. If the papa fruit's rind could also be developed into a dye, good heavens, that would make it even more valuable. This was purple. Before the invention of chemical dyes, natural purple dye was incredibly expensive. Quirsex. Dongliang felt like he had struck gold. So excited his hands were trembling. He immediately wrote you a letter detailing this papa fruit, attached 4 samples presented by the local natives, and sent it back to you overnight via the fastest eagle message. Although you remained secluded at home, news of the captives' arrival in Wei Shan Commandery reached you punctually. This time, The captured barbarian tribe's male captives, adults and children combined, numbered over 1,000. Currently, they were all queuing up in Xin Commandery to receive their benefits, enjoying the toe-cutting treatment. Once repaired, they would be packaged off to major construction sites, adding bricks and tiles to the Han tribe's infrastructure. Naturally, such minor matters didn't require your personal attention. You merely needed to lift a finger and issue orders to the administrative heads in various regions. For example, spring is coming. Are the farming tools, seeds, plow oxen, and labor force ready? If not, get your asses moving and prepare them. If spring planting is delayed, you can forget about keeping your official posts. Since ancient times, the people have regarded food as heaven. For an agrarian people, farming was the most important matter under the sky. The Han tribe was fundamentally agricultural, and this principle was etched into its very bones. As for the tedious ceremonies for this year's spring sacrifices, you tossed the responsibility to Jianyuan. That fellow seemed quite interested in shamanistic rituals anyway, which suited you fine. You were happy to have the leisure, and would just show up briefly to go through the motions. Unconsciously, 6 years had passed since you arrived in this world. You now had 2 children and had reached the ripe old age of 17. Furthermore, the rat shaman, whom you had ordered years ago to study sundials and devise a calendar system, had finally produced results. Thus, taking advantage of the early spring this year, you waved your hand grandly and promulgated the Han tribe's new system, an era name system, the division of 4 seasons, 14 months, and 14 double hours, Shichen, in a day. Starting this year, the Han tribe officially adopted the era name Jianyuan, Establishment Era. The day following the last full moon night of winter was designated as the first day of the first month, established as the Yuandan Festival, marking the beginning of the new year. Released concurrently was the Jianyuan New Calendar. This official calendar divided the year into 4 seasons, spring, summer, autumn, and winter, comprising 14 months, each with 30 days. A leap year occurred every 14 years, during which 1 extra day was added to each month. The time of each day was divided equally into 14 double hours based on the movement of a sundial's shadow. With this settled, the Han tribe finally had a reliable method for recording time. Henceforth, whether scheduling farm work, factory shifts, school classes, or transmitting information, there would be clear points in time, and everyone could clearly understand just how frustrating information delays could be. School semesters and daily school start and end times could now be precise down to the double hour, causing management efficiency to soar. As the great contributor to the new calendar, the elderly rat shaman would naturally not be spared your rewards. In any case, the rat shaman had no descendants, so no matter how high his status, it couldn't be passed down, making rewarding him stress-free. Besides, the old man had truly poured his heart and soul into devising the calendar. His contribution was immense, and a heavy reward was well-deserved. On the afternoon of the 26th day of the 14th month of the Jianyuan era, you were nestled at home, studying blueprints and pondering how to upgrade the coke ovens to create a double retort tower, when Shui Dongliang's eagle message arrived. Strangely, this time there wasn't just a letter, but also a bulging package. You lifted the package. It felt light and airy, as if stuffed with foam. It had considerable volume but little weight. The thought of cotton didn't cross your mind, and you casually opened the letter first. But after roughly scanning the contents of the letter, your composure instantly vanished. It was from Shui Dongliang. As the Sima of the Huben Guard, he hadn't written a single word about fighting. Instead, he only talked about how they obtained some kind of fruit-bearing thing from the local natives. It looked like a loofah, became hollow when old, and was filled with white fluffy stuff resembling clumps of wool. Shui Dongliang excitedly stated in the letter that he believed this thing could absolutely replace wool and become a new raw material for textiles, urging you to pay close attention. Pay attention? How could you not pay attention? You had constantly told that fellow Yu Fu during his sea explorations to keep an eye out for textile raw materials that could replace wool and ramie. But though he had gone out numerous times and found quite a few mines when it came to local specialty plants, he was practically plant blind. You understood, however. Yu Fu's fleet spent most of its time sailing. Opportunities to interact with local natives were few. Even if there were good things locally, communication barriers made discovery difficult. Now, learning that the contents of this package were very likely the plant wool, cotton, you had longed for, you were so excited you almost jumped. For joy, you quickly carried the package into the inner room, ready to let your wives and children feast their eyes, acting as if you were about to reveal some earth-shattering prize. In truth, it was also to provide some amusement and relieve the boredom for your two wives during their postpartum confinement period. "Husband, what is this you're holding?" Xiao Dai asked curiously, cradling Luo Cheng, who was sleeping like a little piglet. Hey, I don't know what it is either, haven't opened it yet." You chuckled, deliberately being mysterious. "But this is something good our expeditionary force obtained. It said it can replace wool and completely free our Han tribe from dependence. On Grassland wool, come, let's open the box together." Could it be that plant wool you mentioned? The kind that can be grown? Jianyuan also looked up in surprise. Being with you daily, they naturally knew about some of your grand blueprints. This leader, Yi Xin, intent on developing agriculture and establishing an agrarian empire, most eagerly desired to find a plant that could be cultivated to completely solve the clothing problem for all tribe members. This was a top priority. No one had expected this day to arrive so quickly. You carefully opened the package. Inside was first a pile of straw. Clearing away the straw revealed 4 mango-sized purple fruits. The beautiful purple color instantly captured Jianyuan's and Xiao Dai's attention, while your gaze locked firmly onto the cracks in the fruit husks. Some pure white, soft fibers were already playfully peeking out from the crevices. These few, fruits picked early, hadn't fully exploded yet, only showing a few small cracks. You thought for a moment, decided to keep 2 as samples, and break open the remaining 2 to see their internal structure first. No sooner said than done. The 3 of you immediately gathered around the fruits and got to work. The dried rind of the papa fruit was somewhat hard and particularly tough, feeling a bit like dried pomegranate peel. However, this level of hardness was nothing to you. Applying a little force along the cracks, you easily tore open the 4 petals. Appearing before your eyes were clumps of snow-white cotton bolls. They clung tightly to the inner side of the rind, like silkworms in cocoons. Each petal bore 5 to 6 cotton bolls of varying sizes, the ones closer to the center being larger, those at the sides smaller. By this count, a single fruit contained at least 20 cotton bolls. Xiao Dai and Jianyuan were now experts in the textile field. The process of spinning fiber into yarn and then weaving it into cloth was crystal clear to them. Seeing so many white, soft cotton bolls, both their eyes lit up, and they couldn't resist reaching out. Jianyuan picked up a cotton boll and gently pulled at it with her hand, discovering that the fibers were dispersed, unlike a silkworm cocoon which is formed by one long filament wound into a ball. She was instantly overjoyed. "Husband, look quickly. This fiber is easy to process, not like silkworm cocoons where you have to find that invisibly fine thread end. What a hassle." This type of dispersed fiber, though lacking a fixed direction, was the simplest to handle. Xiao Dai also pried out a cotton boll, tore at it a few times with both hands, pulled out several strands of fluffy white cotton fiber, carefully straightened them to look, then asked you to find a ruler to measure. The measurement astonished all 3 of you. The fiber length in the largest cotton boll actually exceeded 3 centimeters. Fibers this long were definitely sufficient for spinning yarn. Xiao Dai immediately rubbed some fibers together, directly twisting a rough cotton thread with her fingers, then began testing its tensile strength. Hopefully it wouldn't be as brittle as linen thread. It would be awkward if the thread broke every time the shuttle pulled it on the loom. Fortunately, the worst fear did not materialize. It turned out that the cotton thread spun from this fiber was quite strong. Next, Xiao Dai and Jianyuan worked together, removing all the cotton bolls from the 2 papa fruits. They spread them out, fluffed them by hand, and made a palm-sized thick cotton pad. They wanted to test its insulation and resilience when used as filling. Would it meet the standards? Loft and resilience were especially crucial for warmth. Both. Cotton clothes and quilts rely on the air layer trapped between fibers for insulation. Therefore, the filling must be sufficiently fluffy to store a large amount of air. It also needed good resilience so that when compressed while worn, it could quickly return to its original shape. Otherwise, if the air was squeezed out, it wouldn't provide warmth. To the renewed relief of all three, this cotton fiber exhibited excellent loft and resilience. Actually, thinking about it, it made sense. If this stuff wasn't sufficiently fluffy and elastic, how could it possibly burst open such a hard fruit husk? After a round of handling, experimentation, and analysis by the three of you could finally be 100% certain. This stuff was cotton. It could not only be woven into cloth but also used as filling. Having this material was like activating a powerful cheat code for the Han tribe's population growth and work efficiency. Setting aside cloth for a moment, the mere fact that it could be used as insulation filling was enough to allow the entire Han tribe to bid farewell to animal hides. The saved hides, after tanning, could be made into higher-grade leather goods or fur coats, possessing greater value. Moreover, with abundant cotton clothing and quilts, the situation where the Han tribe could do nothing during winter would be completely changed. Work efficiency would significantly increase. Most importantly, once cotton clothing became widespread, the Han tribe could brave the severe cold and continue expanding its territory northward. Otherwise, if the weather was too cold, no matter how many ideas you had, you could only stare helplessly. Jianyuan era, Year 1, First Month. This was the first clearly recorded year in the history of the Han tribe, and the first day of the first month, which you had designated as the Yuandan Festival, although lacking fixed celebratory customs, had its rules established. All official factories were to have a 7-day holiday. The same applied to government offices in various regions. Except for a few unlucky souls left on duty, everyone else was let loose to go home. Furthermore, starting this year, the sacrificial activities also underwent a slight change. Grand ceremonies like sacrifices to heaven, earth, and the state altars remained firmly in your hands, but the matter of ancestor veneration was delegated downwards. Every household, taking advantage of the long holiday, began preparations to worship their own ancestors or deceased elders. Since there were sacrifices, food was naturally indispensable. Consequently, a trend of slaughtering pigs and sheep spontaneously arose during the Han tribe's Yuandan festival. Pig and sheep heads were placed on offering tables to honor ancestors. The remaining meat was either made into various delicacies or cured for later consumption. In short, for these few days, everyone's bellies were quite full of greasy food. New year, new beginnings. Eating well at the start of the year was also meant to bring good luck, hoping for strong bodies and ample strength in the new year to work harder and earn more grain. After several days of feasting and drinking during the last 3 days of the holiday, everyone began to busily check farm tools and prepare seeds. Once the festival passed, the temperature began to rise steadily, signaling the prime time for spring planting. Everything else could be delayed, but not farm work. In the Han tribe, this was a matter of utmost importance. When the 8th day of the first month arrived, the official start of the work year, you gave the order and all the commanderies and counties under the Han tribe mobilized entirely, plunging into the vigorous tide of spring planting. Anyway, the Han tribe's current territory wasn't vast, mostly situated along the same latitude, so the temperatures were similar everywhere. There was no need yet for region-specific adaptations. Everyone just marched forward in unison. The weather. That day was exceptionally fine, sunny and bright, with a gentle spring breeze carrying a long mist warmth. The air was filled with the fragrance of wildflowers, refreshing the spirit. As the top leader of the Han tribe, you naturally had to lead by example and set a model for the common people. Thus, you personally went down to the fields, drove and painstakingly plowed several acres of land. However, what you planted in this field wasn't grain, but various vegetables and fruits. There were several common vegetables of the Han tribe, as well as the red-fleshed watermelons brought back by Yufu's fleet last year. Although those watermelons were pitifully small, the largest weighing only about 2 jin, approx. Krokingkan 2.2. Besides these, there were the newly acquired cotton seeds and grapevines transplanted from the Zhou tribe's territory. Although your plot didn't produce grain, it served as the experimental field for the Han tribe's agricultural technology. Planting methods for many new crops were first figured out here before being promoted to the populace, just like corn and soybeans previously. After finally finishing the spring planting, you stayed home for another 2 days. Seeing that both baby's umbilical cords had fallen off successfully, you then set out for Xin Commandery. There was a heap of new construction plans for this year, but no matter what was being built, it had to start here in Xin Commandery. It could be said that Xin Commandery was the absolute top priority for this year's construction efforts. Upon your arrival in Xin Commandery, it was the familiar face, Yunji, who personally received you. You didn't give him a pleasant look. This guy, an outsider, had managed to become commandery governor by offering a pledge of allegiance of 50,000 people. Now, a year later, he still hadn't gathered the promised 50,000, so naturally you wouldn't be polite. "It's been a year, right?" You began bluntly. "The 50,000 people you promised, how many are still missing? When can you deliver?" Yunji was clearly prepared, not flustered at all, and directly presented his rehearsed lines. Reporting. To the chief, Xin Commandery currently has over 28,000 people. It's just that at the end of last year, the chief transferred quite a few people from here for military service, which is why the number didn't reach 30,000. As for when the task can be completed, I estimate it will take at least another half year. You nodded, then abruptly changed the subject. Take your time, no rush. The most important thing is stability, and the methods can be gentler. What I want are people who can live stable lives, not slaves with their toes cut off. I hope you understand. Pausing, you dropped another bombshell. Oh, right, draft a list this month. I need to transfer 3,000 households from Xin Commandery to the west to form the new Xin Gang Commandery, New Steel Commandery. Write the relocation announcement like this. Free housing upon arrival. Tax exemption for the first year. Taxes halved for the second and third years, plus each household gets 2 gazelles and a small handcart. Heads of households must be under 35 years old and must bring their direct minor children. Quotas are limited. Register quickly. The relocation date is set for the first day of the second month. You nonchalantly stated the plan you had long conceived. Hearing it, Yunji's face turned green. He had painstakingly traded 50,000 people for the position of commandery governor, hoping to use these people to build Xin Commandery into the Han tribe's strongest commandery. Yet with a single sentence, you wanted to move 3,000 households away. That was 3,000 households, not 3,000 people. Calculated by household, each family with dependents would be at least 3 or 4 people. 3,000. Households meant over 10,000 people, directly digging out nearly half of Xin Commandery's population. His hard work over the past year, wasn't it all for nothing? Back to square one overnight. How could Yunji, intent on growing strong, agree? He immediately started making excuses. Chief, isn't 3,000 households too many? Our way. Xin Commandery is also a new commandery. Its foundation is weak. You acted as if you hadn't heard his complaints, merely replying faintly. 3,000 households is indeed quite a lot, but you certainly can provide them, can't you? Before he could retort, you continued. Besides, the population transfer isn't just targeting you. Other commanderies and counties also have to contribute people, just not as many as yours. Those are old territories, with basically no one left around them. But it's different here. Didn't you say you could bring in another 20,000 plus people in the first half of the year? You have the ability to replenish, they don't. Furthermore, you tapped the table. You keep absorbing population here. One commandery is nearing 30,000 people. Do you know how many resources are needed to support such a large city? Setting aside grain and such, just ironware alone, do you know how much consumption will increase? The Han tribe cannot just increase its population without increasing production. Otherwise, before long, with more and more people and resources not keeping up, we will only regress from our current prosperity back to the primitive era. Therefore, we need to build Xin Gang Commandery. Only by establishing that place will the new people you bring back have tools and farm implements to use. Otherwise, do you plan for them to continue playing with slash-and-burn agriculture? This barrage of words left Yunji speechless, only able to pinch his nose and accept it. Regardless of your true intentions, the reasoning was undeniably sound and irrefutable. As the population increased, the demand for ironware would inevitably. He couldn't just reap the benefits without contributing, could he? Ultimately, under your combined threats and inducements, Yunji could only agree. Although he was 10,000 times unwilling in his heart, you indeed intended to give him a sharp reminder. Look at his attitude just now, projecting a misguided confidence of, as long as the 50,000 aren't gathered, you can't touch me. I might not touch you casually, but I can touch your people. Aren't you relying on your large population to drag your feet on my progress? Fine, I'll directly dig out half your people. Let's see how you drag things out now. Let's see how long it takes you to recruit enough people. Poor Yunji, still secretly competing with you at this moment, hadn't thought that far ahead at all. Having settled the migration issue, you asked about the captives. How are those captured? Prisoners doing? Reporting to the chief, they are all recuperating, Yunji replied. The punishment took place in winter. The cold weather aided wound recovery. Out of more than 1,000, only 3 died, which is quite good. You nodded again, then demanded more people. These slaves, I will also take them all away on the first day of the 2nd month. Chief? Hearing you demand people again, Yunji almost jumped up in agitation. He was about to say something but was cut off directly by you. Don't tell me you need these slaves. What use do you have for them? You stated bluntly. These slaves were captured by the army. They are the tribe's public property. How they are allocated is my decision. They will definitely be taken away. However, you changed tack, offering a sweetener. Your Weishan commandery has contributed significantly this year, so you deserve some compensation. How about this? The women and children of those captives will be assigned to you. You can use these women and children as bait to attract those tribes still hesitating and watching. You gave him a wicked grin and suggested a strategy. Publicize outwards that anyone joining the Han tribe gets a luxurious big house. If they're single bachelors, they even get assigned a wife. Buy one, get one free with a ready-made kid thrown in. How convenient. Saves them the trouble of having their own. Yunji's mouth twitched hearing this, almost sputtering blood. But he had to admit, your move was damn brilliant. This was indeed the way to maximize the value of these captives' wives and daughters, and it had numerous benefits. First, it could attract outsiders to join, strengthening the Han tribe. Second, marrying these captives' wives and daughters to newly joined members could effectively divert their hatred away from the Han tribe. And third, it avoided hidden dangers. If these women were rewarded to meritorious soldiers who had personally destroyed their tribes and were now marrying their wives, it would be somewhat awkward, potentially sowing seeds of future trouble, and offered no extra benefit. To the tribe, therefore, you came up with this rotten idea. These captives' wives and the newcomers who had just joined the Han tribe were strangers to each other. Settling them in a completely unfamiliar environment with much better living conditions than before, you believed that before long these reconstituted families would thoroughly integrate into the Han tribe and become true members. Xin Gang Commandery, as the name suggests, its main task is steelmaking. And the star attraction in the steel mill is definitely the soon-to-be-laid railway tracks. In the Han tribe's current metallurgical technology, the blast furnace is only considered a rough processing stage, turning iron ore into molten iron. But this molten iron is far from being steel. It has to be poured into a huge crucible, and then transported to the steel-making furnace for further refining. Previously, this step was incredibly laborious. Firstly, the crucible was hot enough to roast meat. Secondly, the thing was incredibly heavy. Ordinary roads and small handcarts simply couldn't handle it. In modern times, you'd just use a gantry crane or other lifting equipment. But for the current Han tribe, the technical difficulty is akin to reaching the heavens. Thus, you thought of railway tracks. The plan is to lay a dedicated track between the blast furnace and the steel-making furnace, specifically for transporting crucibles filled with scorching molten iron. These railway tracks have many advantages. First, strong load-bearing capacity. Think about it. The wheels rest on the entire rail, and beneath the rails are rows of sleepers distributing the pressure layer by layer. Even carrying a crucible weighing several tons probably wouldn't be a problem. Second, high temperature resistance. It's lumps of iron, after all, not afraid of heat, practically tailor-made for transporting high-temperature crucibles. Finally, there's your little hidden agenda. You want the people of the Han tribe to encounter the concept of railways early on. Even if there are no steam locomotives now, and it's not used for transportation, they should at least know, whoa, so roads can be built like this. Compared to ordinary roads, what's so great about railways? Plant a seed in the minds of the people first. This way, even if you pass away someday and the Han tribe's technology hasn't reached that stage, hope remains for the future appearance of trains. However, you are quite confident about this. Even if you can't achieve it in your lifetime, you believe your kids will eventually manage to figure out this train thing. After discussing the steel mill matters, you repeatedly urged him to first build the housing for the common people, and also keep up with public facilities like the city. Walls, streets, government offices, banks, and schools. You would send people to help with this, and another batch of new slaves would be transferred next month for support. Having arranged all this, you finally returned home to Hanyang City with peace of mind. After a month's absence, the two little ones had already opened their big watery eyes and were staying awake longer. They could finally stare wide-eyed with you, their old father, engaging in some eye-contact communication. So you continued, being a stay-at-home dad, pondering daily how to soothe the babies, inventing little things like cradles and rattle drums, while simultaneously, through various channels, remotely directing the construction tasks across the Han tribe's territories. One day, just as you finished assembling the new cradle sent from the woodworking shop, and the rattle drum you personally designed was fresh off the line, news finally arrived from Yuji, who had been out wandering. For nearly 3 months, the Eagle message stated that he had successfully rendezvoused with the Qianniu Guard, who had arrived by ship. However, they didn't land immediately. Instead, Yuji himself boarded the ship, took the fleet further south for another day, and finally anchored near a shore full of strange, jagged rocks, preparing to build the city right there. According to Yuji's description and the accompanying hand-drawn sketch map, showing the spheres of influence of various powers in the terrain along the lake, this location was on the southwestern shore of the Great Lake, a rather sensitive position, smack dab in the border area between the two major powers, Maodun and Suritu. Using this place as a boundary, Suritu's territory to the north is larger but relatively arid and barren. Maodun's territory to the south, though smaller, is nourished by an underground river flowing from the Great Lake, boasting lush water and grass and plentiful forests, ensuring no shortage of timber and fuel. Even further south of the Great Lake, there are tribes living between the lakeshore and the bay. They don't practice herding, but live by fishing, hunting, and gathering, belonging to settled tribes. These people are more capable of enduring hardship, and their fighting strength is not weak. Unfortunately, their lands are unsuitable for raising horses, so their mobility can't compare to Maodun's. After being subdued by Maodun several times, they have now completely become his subordinates, not only exploited but also forced to serve as his lackeys. The beauty of this location chosen by Yuji lies precisely in its position between the Two powers. The shore here is all stone, and the water is relatively deep, suitable for building a deep-water wharf to accommodate large ships. To the south of the shore, there is also a forest of several dozen hectares, mainly shrubs and trees. Locals say an underground river passes beneath this forest. Along the river, some areas have lush surface vegetation, while in others, water seeps out to form ponds and lakes, nourishing countless pastures and livestock on the grasslands. Building the city here perfectly meets your initial requirements. 1. Suitable conditions for building a wharf. 2. A forest providing fuel. 3. Positioned on the edge of the two powers, convenient for playing balance of power politics. Manipulating relations, whether wooing or suppressing either side, would be easier in the future. This also offers great benefits for developing trade. Firstly, being centrally located, neither side coming to do business would be interfered with by the other, allowing relative economic freedom. Secondly, it's not far from the bay, making future interactions with the Xin tribe on Bamboo Island convenient. The Han tribe could absolutely use this place as a base to gradually extend its reach towards the Xin tribe. Even if the Xin tribe leader disagrees later, the Han tribe could bypass him directly to win over the smaller tribes under his control. For the farmland issue you mentioned, the conditions here are met. Proximity to water sources and the forest makes reclaiming some fields near the lake and forest entirely feasible. If that's not enough, artificial canals could be dug for irrigation, but that would be a massive undertaking, likely unachievable, within 1 or 2 years. As for the city's construction area, there are no particular restrictions. Yufu did indeed discuss territory size with Suritu previously, but now that the Han tribe has chosen a site on the edge of his sphere of influence, Suritu can't really object. After all, even if this piece of land were given to him to manage, he might not willingly come here. To put it bluntly, this land is the buffer zone between Maodun and Suritu. Both sides tacitly accept it as the boundary, usually keeping to their own affairs. However, Maodun has been getting a bit arrogant lately, frequently crossing the border to raid Suritu's territory. But the Han tribe need not worry about Maodun's attitude at all. You even wish he would take the initiative to cause trouble and pick a fight with you. Why? Everyone knows that ancient nomadic tribes were mostly poor with little fixed property. Their homes were tents, migrating with water and grass. Wherever the grass was plentiful, they went. When it was consumed, they moved on. This lifestyle makes them difficult to deal with. Agrarian peoples cannot leave their land, have fewer horses, and their horsemanship is generally average. The advantage of agrarian peoples lies in settlement. They excel at production, inventing weapons, and are not weak in warfare, especially sieges and defense. But comparing the two sides becomes awkward. Agrarian powers like the Han tribe are indeed capable fighters, but they excel at defensive battles, siege warfare, and city defense. As for pursuit in the open field, few cavalry, 2 legs can't outrun 4, unable to catch up. And the nomads, their greatest characteristic isn't fighting prowess but cunning. The moment they see they can't win or feel it's not worth the cost, they immediately mount their horses and bolt, leaving you to stare helplessly. Therefore, you very much hope to provoke Maodun a bit, make him attack you first. Then you can leverage the advantage of the Han tribe's heavy infantry to teach him a solid lesson. But if the Han tribe actively seeks a decisive battle with Maodun's main force, you'd have to weigh the options carefully. Firstly, attacking an enemy waiting at ease with an exhausted army after a long trek, unless your brain is flooded. Secondly, Maodun most likely wouldn't engage in a decisive battle with you. It doesn't fit the nomadic wolf pack mentality of fight if you can. Win, run if you can't. If they can get rich by raiding, why would they fight you to the death? You estimate that if the Han tribe adopts an offensive posture, Maodun would likely flee immediately, then shadow your infantry from afar like a wolf pack, waiting until you're tired before rushing in for a bite. This is the tactic that serves their interests. A fight is definitely coming. Sooner or later, there must be a life-or-death battle between the Han tribe and Maodun. If for no other reason, then because that fellow still owes the Han tribe payment for tens of thousands of cattle and horses. If you don't show him some consequences, he will only become increasingly arrogant in the future. But exactly how to fight requires careful consideration. Your plan is to first move all the troops over, build the city while simultaneously intensifying cavalry training. First, use diplomatic means to press Maodun for repayment. If he obediently pays up, that's best. If he can't resist attacking first, even better. If he defaults on the debt and refuses to pay, then you can only wait for the right moment to start the war, hoping the Han tribe's cavalry will be serviceable by then. After receiving Yuji's message, you immediately contacted Yu Fu, instructing him that when his fleet returns, he should make a detour to find those small tribes on the grasslands who had previously traded with the Han tribe, preferably those tiny groups of a few hundred people, or even just single individual households. See if they can be recruited directly and arrange for them to live in the new city. Then recruit a batch of young men from these people to form a temporary cavalry unit to help the Han tribe fight. Additionally, when Yu Fu returns to the previous Barbarian tribe's encampment, he should meet up with the follow-up fleet transporting supplies and tools, and also transport the Huben Guard soldiers to Yuji's location to rendezvous with the Qianniu Guard, ensuring sufficient forces to defend against Maodun. Simultaneously, you ordered them to build the wharf first. As for building the city itself, you would have to go see it in person before deciding. Actually, you already had a plan in mind for how to build this new grassland city. You just hadn't surveyed the site personally, making it difficult to make the final decision. In your vision, this city must have a nesting doll-style multi-layered defense structure to cope with various emergencies. First, there must be a super-large wharf, capable of docking a large number of ships simultaneously, and in an emergency, even evacuating everyone in the city at once. This wharf must also be enclosed by walls, extending into the deep water area to prevent those nomads from raiding ships and goods. Then extend the wharf and walls onto the shore to enclose an inner city. The inner city would primarily contain vital facilities like warehouses, residences, bank vaults, government offices, barracks, and schools. A wide avenue would lead directly to the wharf. This area must be heavily guarded, allowing entry only to Han tribe members or strictly vetted merchants. Next, outside the inner city, build another ring, the outer city. The outer city would mainly be divided into two major districts. The eastern district is the commercial area, selling various daily necessities, and naturally including inns, taverns, and restaurants. The western district is the specialized livestock market. Grassland people don't have much to sell, mainly cattle, horses, sheep, hides, and horns. They could sell their livestock to Han tribe merchants in the western market, exchange them for currency, then go spend it in the eastern market. Those with money who didn't want to leave could stay in inns. This outer city must also be habitable. You plan to settle those grassland people willing to join the Han tribe in the outer city. They would have residency rights in the outer city, enjoy the treatment of ordinary Han tribe citizens, and their main job would be to help manage the livestock sold to the Han tribe. The inner city walls must be built high and thick, with maximum defensive capability. Several aerial sky bridges must also be built on the inner city walls, connecting to the outer city walls. This way, defending troops could be flexibly deployed between the inner and outer cities without being attacked by enemies below. Why this design? Because you never intended to defend the outer city to the death. This city is primarily for trade with the grassland tribes. You can't just forbid them from entering, right? How the hell could you do business then? But once you let them in, heaven knows if someone might suddenly turn hostile, launch surprise attacks, rob, and commit arson. Therefore, if fighting breaks out, the outer city is basically expendable. The key is relying on the inner city. Of course, some defense is still necessary. If someone does cause trouble within the city, there are only two possibilities. 1. Small-scale skirmishes arising spontaneously, nothing to fear. 2. A premeditated, large-scale siege, with agents infiltrated into the city beforehand as inside support, aiming to coordinate from within and without. It is precisely considering the second possibility that you design this inner and outer city structure, placing all important facilities within the inner city and connecting to the outer walls with sky bridges. Thus, if a riot breaks out inside the city or a large army presses from outside, all city gates can be immediately closed, separating the inner and outer cities. The inner city holds firm, supplies are ample, warehouses are inside, and the wharf leading directly to the lake allows for evacuation or reinforcement at any time. The inner city defenders can rapidly deploy to the outer city walls via the sky bridges, utilizing the advantage of the inner and outer walls to turn the entire outer city into a giant killing jar. No matter how many enemies infiltrate, they will be caught in a pincer attack from both inside and out, finding no place for burial. Furthermore, outside the outer city walls, several protruding bastions must be built. Defenders in these strong points could attack enemies climbing the walls from the flank, making the entire city defense system a truly 360-degree defense with no blind spots.